a little bit, but first I'm going to start with my impressions of the Guilty Gear Strive closed beta test. So we'll open with a disclaimer, which was that this was a real ass beta test. What up, Judson? This was definitely a real ass beta test. Like normally when I see especially fighting games show up for like closed beta tests or whatever, it's like this, oh, here's a beta, but they're not actually like you can see from the amount of completion that's in there that the game isn't really a beta, right? Like it's more of a beta in the sense that like we're pretty sure that this will work. We just want to get it out there, mostly to secure the actual launch, right? You want to make sure your shit doesn't fuck up on launch, and so you release something that's already pretty high confidence, right? This was a real ass beta test. We played a version of GG Strive, which generally failed to connect players to each other for matches and had no training mode environment, which meant that every play session was characterized by frustration, whether we were trying to explore the game in versus CPU or get matches in the lobbies. And this is really important when you look at people's feedback, because it's really hard to separate the feedback from the experience. You can say critical stuff like the damage is too high and this lobby UX is annoying, and that's going to feel even sharper to the players when it's taking 5 to 10 minutes to get a match, right? So I'm not going to go into my opinions on the lobby system and its issues because it wasn't really working. And I saved it for the survey already. And just so we know, I wrote up my impressions after playing for one evening in the versus CPU loop on Thursday night and two of the network play sessions. I played Friday night and Saturday afternoon. So let's talk about the gameplay. To start with, depth in fighting games typically comes from the space created by three factors, right? One is the number of possible situations that both players can be in. Two is the number of decisions that each player can make in those situations. And three is the degree to which those decisions are unlocked by a player's increasing knowledge, executional accuracy, and speed, and opponent reads. The core combat design in Strive has significantly reduced the set of possible situations and player decisions from Guilty Gear Xrd. And they've done this by limiting the Gatling chain combo routes for each character, eliminating air tech, shrinking every character's move list, and deleting or modifying a whole bunch of smaller systems like throws and air dashes to shrink the possibility space overall. It's not nearly as small as Street Fighter or Samurai Showdown, and some mechanics like the breakable walls and the Roman cancel reworks are actually pretty elegant in terms of how they try to keep some complexity while still simplifying from Xrd. But if you are playing Guilty Gear because you like the feeling of playing a fighting game which is seemingly endless, the current Strive beta is probably not going to feel like this. Instead, you're going to feel constrained by the game's limits far more often than you will feel delighted by its possibilities. Now, this is not inherently a bad thing. Guilty Gear Xrd is intimidating in its complexity, and that scares off many potential players before they even try to get started. ArcSys is explicitly trying to bring in new players to enjoy Guilty Gear, and they've got a business to run. And while I personally love Guilty Gear specifically because of the complexity, I understand that catering to my personal tastes in this respect is probably not the play that justifies the incredible investment they've put into the game's look alone. If Strive is a game that brings new players into Guilty Gear, I'll be happy for them, even if it's not for me personally. But the problem is, I don't think the decisions they're making are actually that good for people who are new to fighting games. Gatlings, for example, are good for new players because they let them get the basic satisfaction of pressing buttons and seeing them combo into each other without having to think too hard about which buttons they're pressing. Trust me, I know, my wife is a jam player. If even the combo... the Sorry, even if the combo they're doing isn't very good, they get to enjoy doing the combo early on and build up their knowledge of combo routes over time as they get better. Which is to say, the new player knows so little about fighting games and has such limited ability to process what's happening in real time and make decisions informed by conscious intention that the Gatling system actually ends up being more useful to them precisely because they don't have to think about it until they're ready for it. I frequently hear folks throw shade at Xrd for its incredibly dense set of mechanics, with stuff like instant block, blitz shield, air tech, one frame option selectable throws, character weights, and wake up times, never mind all the character specific systems, because it's too hard to learn. But in my experience learning and teaching the game, it's actually really nice to have that much stuff because it's far too much for anyone to keep in mind at once. And so you just learn them by playing the game over time. In other words, if you look at how new players actually learn Xrd, the size of the possibility space isn't really that big an issue because they can't even begin to take in the big picture to begin with. New players are intimidated by how fast the game is and how long the combos are, and all you need to do is reassure them that they will be able to do that stuff too, and remind them that it's okay to suck because we all did when we started out, and they'll be fine. But the changes in Strive don't do this. By reducing the possibility space in the developers have reduced the power that players earn through experience over time. You can't learn as many small situational confirms without open gatlings and character weights to create as many situations. And you can't test your opponent on their knowledge and patience in air tech situations if you don't have air tech. Thank you, Sir Crazy. This doesn't benefit people who know nothing about fighting games, but it does benefit people who know a little bit about fighting games. I think Kyan Nasaki, he's the dude who made I Want to Be the Guy, called it best when he observed that the intermediate player is actually the big winner in Strive, because when people who already know how to play fighting games look at Guilty Gear right now, they can accurately see how much more work it would take to be as good at it as they currently are at the game they're playing, and then they say, no thanks. This is actually why I've had an easier time getting people who don't know shit about fighting games to play Guilty Gear than people who do actually know some shit about fighting games. Now, I feel this the most when I look at what they did to Chip in Guilty Gear Strive. When I first started learning Chip in Guilty Gear XX, I was immediately taken by how cool all of his special moves were. Moving around with Alpha Blade and teleports was fun as hell. Gamma Blade let me control the ground and get combos. His Resho Rekka strings gave me an easy combo path on the ground. And the invisibility and the shurikens and the leaf grab all left me thinking about all the dumb tricks I can play on people. I don't think I thought about his normals until like 2 weeks in, and that was after people started punishing me for doing too much teleporting and alpha blading and all that stuff. And when I see baby Chips pick up Exard, the learning curve usually goes something like this, right? First, you start out using all of Chip's special moves to overwhelm players of a similar skill who don't know how to deal with that stuff, right? And then once your opponents learn how to deal with Chip's tools, then you die horribly. That's what Chip does. And so you have to get better combos and setups to match the opponent's damage output, and maybe we learn how to block. Chip players hate blocking. But after that, what you do is you kind of learn Chip's speed and buttons to win in neutral without doing risky shit like teleporting all the time. And then from there, then you get to relearn how to use Chip's special moves to supplement their neutral instead of using it as a crutch to replace your neutral, right? And so what happens is that the people who are new to fighting games usually start from the special moves because their value is a little bit more obvious than a normal move, right? Sagat's Crouching Fierce Punch in CVS2 is one of the most powerful normals in fighting game history. But it's not actually easy to tell unless you know how to test it out or you have someone show you how good it is. It's not until you get to be a mid-level player that you learn how important your character's normals are, because your normals define how you play neutral. Now in Strive, Chip lost his teleport and his invisibility. His Gamma Blade has lost pretty much everything that was good about it. And besides generally feeling less ninja-ish overall, he has to learn how to play and win neutral up front. And I expect that baby Chips and Strive are just going to run in, die fast, and then change characters. Not because he's weak, necessarily, but because the neutral is hard to learn, and if you want to learn Chip, you're going to have to learn it up front. So, based on what we've seen of Strive so far, I don't think it'll hit its goals for new player accessibility, and I don't think it'll make existing Guilty Gear players happy. ArcSys has some time left to change the direction, but probably not enough time to make major changes. And I'm guessing that they'll probably release something that looks more or less like the version we played this weekend, hope that it sells well enough based on the looks, the buzz, and the rollback netcode to justify further investment, and then use updates to build out the stuff that new players and old players want over time. And remember, the first version of a new fighting game is always the worst one. Now, I actually had some people read that line to me and be like, man, you're such a downer. Y'all, this is trivially true of any video game unless the developers make it worse, right? This is just how software development works. The first thing you release is always the worst because you make it better after you release it. And the thing is that Strive will probably be fun, right? This is table stakes. If you like fighting games, pretty much any fighting game is fun. Fun alone is not what motivates us to spend thousands of hours digging deeper into these games. Fun isn't what gets us to stream, to teach, to run events, or produce content. Fun does not build a community. Love does. It's the love for a game that connects us to each other. In an early statement on Strive, game director Daisuke Ishiwatari said, "Game is a bridge that connects people." I think this is true, and the kind of game you make determines the kinds of people you connect with. The thing that I love most about fighting games is that they can make people push themselves beyond their perceived limitations. At their best, they are capable of generating moments of human excellence that all of us can share in and feel awed by and elevated together. Out of all the fighting games out there, I think Guilty Gear is the best at this. And I think that this is what made the Guilty Gear community to be something profoundly special. We're all here to be awesome together. TLDR, play Guilty.